tick, tick, boom. Who bringing the noise? Go baby, we bringing our toys. Separate men from the boys. Chopper be singing, she'll be on the voice.
Okay, so on a Facebook conversation, some questions about this technique were asked about. Okay, so if I go into this technique and my opponent counters with a different kind of grab or something like that, how do I adjust? So the technique, as we've seen in the video, is like this. So if we're in a fighting position, this technique shown in the video obviously starts off with me crashing in and upending my opponent like that, right? Or if we're matched on lead leg, you crash in and bump him out like that, and he goes flying into the wall. All right. So if, for example, I crash in and he grabs this lead arm, what do I do then? Well, see how he's got my shoulder? It doesn't really matter because my hips are under his hips, and I'm just going to pick up and dump him anyways, right? Okay. So say I crash in and he tries to grab my, okay, so he grabs my head. All right, well, who's in a better position anyways? So if I haven't controlled this hand already, this now just becomes a headlock defense where I grab his hand, I get under his hips, and I dump him anyways, right? Okay, so the next counter, the next thing he may try to do is when I crash in, he tries to grab my waist with that lead hand, right? So try and grab my waist. Same thing, right? I still got hip control. The whole idea of this technique is that I'm under his hips. So then I dump him anyways. All right, now, say he understands this technique and he tries to drop his hips while I get into him, all right? Well, now he's got my elbow, okay? Well, no, he's doing right, but now I just hook his leg. Now, if he's not 140 pounds, if he weighs as much or more than I am, then this isn't quite as easy. But the bottom line is, if he tries to drop his hips, I can still hook his leg because I can use my knee as a fulcrum and still dump him over it. Or if that doesn't work, if for whatever reason it doesn't work, we transition to a different stand feet. We can start transitioning to a different grapple altogether. If he's a really competent grappler, then we may just wind up in a pummeling situation where that technique is nullified. Okay. Now, we see this in kata a lot. So in Goju-ryu, in Seiyuchin, in Isshin-ryu, Seiyuchin, same thing. We see this movement quite a bit. In Rohai, we see this. In White Crane, we see this. So this movement, this idea here, so when we take the shadow boxing approach, now I have a partner, right? So if I step in, so switch your leads. So if I step in, boom, right? This is in so many different kata that we practice. It's a very basic technique, okay? Now for pummeling here, so for pummeling, and I've got my lead here, basically, I grab his arm and shoot this way, okay? If for whatever reason we're matched up like this, some of the kata show one arm going one way, one arm going the other way. So maybe before I start that throw, I'm grabbing to get arm control here while I step this way, right? Boom. Or if we're separated,
You have a nice little armbar there.
if we're separated, Okay, we're almost close enough. I'm grabbing and doing that first before he can gain head or waist control. All right, and if that doesn't work, and as Ethan just said, you can get an arm bar. All right, so there's a couple of different variations of that technique to help you understand that just because we show one technique here doesn't mean that there's not a whole other chain of events that can happen in the event that I lose control of an arm, or he grabs my head, or something else. There's lots of different varieties, but the basic understanding of this specific technique is getting your hips down, your leg behind him, and using it as a fulcrum so that when you stand back up, you're pushing his chest over your hip. It's basically like a reverse hip throw. Okay, so I hope that answers the question on, what the follow-on is on that technique if your opponent decides to try and counter it. So appreciate y'all watching, and thanks. Have a great day.